Hi there, my name is James, and welcome to another true crime story. Today we're diving into a case filled with secrets, lies, and dangerous truths. Stay with me as we uncover the chilling events that took place in a quiet town where everything was not as it seemed. On March 15th, 2023, at exactly 7:05 in the evening, the quiet town of Blue Hollow was about to change forever. In a town known for its peaceful streets and tight-knit community, the Monroe family lived in a grand old house on the outskirts. Inside that house, something was terribly wrong. Isabelle Monroe, a 19-year-old girl, sat in her room, looking at the empty space where her mother, Lillian, used to sit. Her mother had disappeared 5 days ago, and Isabelle couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a case of someone leaving town. Something darker was at play. Her stepfather, Paul Monroe, was acting colder than ever. He wasn't a man of many words, but since Lillian's disappearance, his silence felt heavy, like he was hiding something. He hadn't even wanted to report her missing. That was Isabelle's first clue. A husband who didn't want to find his missing wife? It didn't make sense. Isabelle thought about her stepfather's strange behavior. He would stay out late, locking certain rooms in the house, making odd phone calls in the middle of the night, but he never spoke about Lillian. It was as if her mother had vanished and Paul had already moved on. What was Paul hiding? And how far would he go to protect his secret? Isabelle knew her mother wouldn't have just left. She had a feeling Paul knew more than he was letting on. Every day, the house grew colder, and Paul became more distant. But Isabelle wasn't one to let things go. She couldn't. She needed to know what had happened to her mother. And as she dug deeper, the secrets she uncovered would shock her to the core. But what I discovered next would change everything I thought I knew. Isabelle Monroe was 19, a quiet and thoughtful girl. She preferred spending time alone, often sketching in her room or reading. Her mother, Lillian, was the most important person in her life. Isabelle's bond with her mother was deep, but things were different with her stepfather, Paul. Their relationship was tense. Paul wasn't the kind of man you could easily talk to. He rarely showed emotion, and when he did, it was cold and distant. Isabelle often felt alone, even when they were in the same room. Paul Monroe, 45, was a successful real estate mogul. He had built a life based on control of his business, his public image, and, as Isabelle would soon find out, his family. Paul didn't like questions, and he didn't like anything that could threaten his reputation. To outsiders, Paul seemed like a man who had everything under control, but Isabelle knew better. His silence and lack of concern for Lillian's disappearance spoke volumes. It was clear Paul had his own priorities, and finding his wife wasn't one of them. Then there was Lillian Monroe, Isabelle's mother. Lillian was a kind woman who always made sure Isabelle felt loved, but she had secrets that Isabelle hadn't known about until recently. Lillian had been hiding a part of her life, a part that had everything to do with another woman, Rebecca Green. Rebecca was a 35-year-old lawyer in Blue Hollow, and she had mysteriously vanished just a few weeks before Lillian disappeared. No one had connected the two events, but for Isabelle, things started to fall into place when she found letters between her mother and Rebecca. These letters revealed a relationship Isabelle never knew existed. Paul's reaction to Isabelle finding out about the letters was more than just anger. It was fear. He seemed desperate to keep the family's secrets buried, especially when it came to Lillian's relationship with Rebecca. Isabelle was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. But the more she uncovered, the more dangerous things. These letters revealed a relationship Isabelle never knew existed. Paul's reaction to Isabelle finding out about the letters was more than just anger. It was fear. He seemed desperate to keep the family's secrets buried, especially when it came to Lillian's relationship with Rebecca. Isabelle was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. But the more she uncovered, the more dangerous things became. On the morning of March 10th, 2023, Lillian Monroe left the house at 8:20 in the morning. It was a normal day, or so it seemed. Isabelle thought her mother had gone out for errands, as she often did. But by evening, when Lillian hadn't returned, Isabelle started to worry. She called her stepfather, Paul, but he was strangely calm about it. He brushed off her concerns, saying Lillian probably just needed some time away. But Lillian never came back. Days passed and there was still no sign of her. Isabelle couldn't understand why Paul wasn't more concerned. He didn't want to call the police or file a missing persons report. To him, everything seemed fine. But to Isabelle, something was very wrong. Her mother had never just left without telling her. Lillian's phone was found on her bedside table, something she would never leave behind. That was the first sign for Isabelle that something terrible had happened. After 5 days, Isabelle couldn't take it anymore. She went to the Blue Hollow police and reported her mother missing. The investigation began, but there were no immediate leads. Lillian's car was found abandoned on the outskirts of town, with no signs of a struggle. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. But this wasn't just a missing person case. There was more to the story than anyone could see. After Isabelle filed the missing person report on March 15, 2023, the police in Blue Hollow launched their investigation. Officers searched the town and surrounding areas for any signs of Lillian Monroe. Her car, found 2 miles outside of town, offered no real clues. There were no signs of struggle, no suspicious fingerprints, nothing to suggest where she had gone. The police asked Paul Monroe to cooperate, but his reaction was unsettling. He showed little concern and seemed more focused on keeping his public image clean than finding his wife. He told the police that Lillian often went away for a few days to clear her head, a claim that Isabelle knew wasn't true. Lillian had never disappeared like this before. Isabelle noticed Paul becoming more secretive, staying out late, and locking certain rooms in the house. It was clear he didn't want anyone to dig deeper into their family's life. The police tried questioning him further, but his responses were vague, always keeping the focus off himself. Frustrated with the lack of progress, Isabelle decided to take matters into her own hands. She started searching her mother's belongings, hoping to find any clue that might lead her to the truth. That's when she discovered something strange, a set of letters hidden in the back of her mother's closet. These weren't just any letters. They were love letters, addressed to someone named Rebecca Green. The name was familiar. Rebecca had been a local lawyer, and she had gone missing just weeks before Lillian. At first, no one connected the two cases, but now, with the letters in hand, Isabelle began to wonder if the disappearances were somehow linked. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a much darker truth. Isabelle couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The letters she found in her mother's closet were the key to a mystery she never expected. Dated from January 2021 to February 2023, they revealed a secret relationship between her mother, Lillian, and a woman named Rebecca Green. Rebecca was the local lawyer who had vanished just weeks before Lillian disappeared. As Isabelle read through the letters, she realized her mother had been in love with Rebecca. It wasn't just an affair. It was a relationship that Lillian had kept hidden from everyone, especially Paul. Isabelle's heart raced as she pieced together the timeline. Rebecca's disappearance had been sudden, and the town had only whispered about it for a few days before the case went cold. No one had thought to link the two missing women until now. Isabelle's hands trembled as she held the final letter, dated just days before Rebecca went missing. In it, Lillian had written, "I can't keep living this lie. I need to be with you, Rebecca. I'm going to tell him." Was Lillian planning to leave Paul? Isabelle had no doubt now that Paul knew about the affair. The coldness in his eyes, his complete lack of concern for Lillian's disappearance, it all made sense. He was hiding something, and Isabelle needed to find out what it was before it was too late. The more Isabelle uncovered, the more she realized how much danger she was in. Paul had been growing more erratic, more controlling ever since Lillian went missing. He tried to lock certain rooms in the house, forbade Isabelle from asking questions, and even told her to stop looking for her mother. His behavior wasn't just strange, It was frightening. Isabelle knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't confront Paul directly. She was too scared of what he might do. Instead, she decided to investigate on her own. She searched through old photos, documents, and anything else that might help her understand the relationship between her mother and Rebecca. But the deeper she went, the darker the truth became. One night, she overheard Paul on the phone, speaking in a low voice. The words sent chills down her spine. "It's done. She won't be a problem anymore." Isabelle knew at that moment that her stepfather was involved in more than just hiding secrets. The truth was finally coming to light, but with it came danger Isabelle never expected. Isabelle's heart pounded as Paul's words echoed in her mind. "It's done. She won't be a problem anymore." She knew she had to keep quiet, but every moment in the house became unbearable. She couldn't stand being around him, not knowing what he had done to her mother, or Rebecca. Paul was no longer just her cold, distant stepfather. He was dangerous. The tension in the house grew unbearable. Paul started acting even stranger, locking himself in his office for hours, making more phone calls late into the night. Isabelle kept her distance, pretending she didn't suspect anything, but she was constantly on edge. She knew that if Paul found out what she had uncovered, she could be his next target. On the night of March 20th, 2023, Isabelle's fear reached its peak. Paul left the house late, just after 11 in the evening. Isabelle watched from her window as he drove off into the night. Her curiosity got the best of her. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to follow him. Grabbing her jacket and keys, Isabelle quietly slipped out of the house and followed Paul's car from a distance. He drove through the winding roads of Blue Hollow until he stopped at a small, abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town. Isabelle parked her car far enough away to remain unseen and crept toward the cabin, her heart racing. Inside, she saw the faint glow of a light through the window. She peered in and saw something that made her blood run cold. Paul was sorting through a stack of old photos and papers. Among them were pictures of her mother and Rebecca, taken years before. There was no mistaking it now. Paul had known about the affair all along. He had been watching them. Just as Isabelle was about to leave, she heard Paul's voice. He was on the phone again. "I'll take care of it. The house will be empty tomorrow night." The words sent a chill down her spine. Was he planning something? Isabelle knew she had to act quickly. She rushed back home, her mind racing. She couldn't confront him yet, not without more proof. But the next day, she couldn't stay silent any longer. At 7 in the evening on March 21st, Isabelle finally confronted Paul. She stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she held up the letters she found. "I know about Mom and Rebecca. I know you knew too," she said, her voice barely steady. Paul's face hardened. He didn't deny it. "You should have stayed out of this, Isabelle," he replied coldly. "You have no idea what you've just done." In that moment, Isabelle knew the situation was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The man standing in front of her wasn't just hiding secrets. He was willing to do anything to keep them buried. The confrontation had begun, but Isabelle had no idea just how far Paul was willing to go to protect his lies. Isabelle's heart raced as Paul's cold stare pierced through her. His words hung in the air. "You should have stayed out of this." She knew then that there was no turning back. The house was eerily quiet, the tension between them thick enough to cut through. Paul took a slow step toward her. Isabelle backed away, clutching the letters tighter. "What did you do to my mother?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Paul's face remained emotionless, but his eyes betrayed him. There was something dark lurking behind them. "Your mother couldn't handle the truth," Paul finally said, his voice low and measured. "She was going to ruin everything. I couldn't let that happen." Isabelle's blood ran cold. She realized in that moment that Paul was confessing. He had done something to her mother, something terrible. But before she could press further, Paul lunged at her. Isabelle barely had time to react. She stumbled back, hitting the kitchen counter. The letters scattered across the floor as Paul grabbed her by the arm, his grip tight and unforgiving. "You don't know what you're doing, Isabelle," Paul snarled. "This is bigger than you think." Isabelle struggled, managing to break free from his grasp. She ran for the door, but Paul was faster. He blocked her path, and for a brief moment she thought it was all over. The fear was suffocating, but she knew she couldn't give up. With all her strength, Isabelle grabbed a nearby vase and swung it at Paul, hitting him across the head. He stumbled, momentarily dazed. It was her chance. Isabelle ran for the front door, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop until she was outside, gasping for air. She made it to her car and sped away, not looking back. The truth was out, but Isabelle knew this wasn't over. The police had to be called. Paul couldn't get away with this. Isabelle drove straight to the police station, her hands shaking as she relayed everything to the officers. By the time she finished, they were already on their way to arrest Paul. On March 22, 2023, at 3:45 in the morning, Paul Monroe was taken into custody at the Monroe house. The man who had once controlled everything was now under the control of the law. During the investigation, more disturbing truths came to light. Police found evidence in the abandoned cabin that linked Paul to both Lillian's and Rebecca's disappearances. Personal items belonging to both women were discovered, hidden in the cabin Paul had frequented late at night. It was clear that Paul had been covering his tracks for months. The trial began in April 2024, and Isabelle had to relive every painful moment on the witness stand. She described Paul's coldness, the hidden letters, and the violent confrontation in chilling detail. The courtroom was silent as the evidence was laid out: pictures, forensic findings, and even Paul's phone records, which revealed his suspicious late-night calls. Paul's defense was weak, claiming that everything was a misunderstanding, but the jury saw through his lies. After 2 days of deliberation, Paul Monroe was found guilty of conspiracy and the murder of Lillian Monroe and Rebecca Green. Justice had been served, but for Isabelle, the scars remained. Her mother was gone, and the truth had come at a price she would never forget. Just when Isabelle thought the nightmare was over, another revelation came to light. During Paul's trial, it was discovered that he had manipulated local officials to keep both disappearances under wraps. Paul had used his wealth and influence to slow down the investigation, ensuring that no one would dig too deeply into his personal affairs. It became clear why the police hadn't found any real leads earlier. Paul had been controlling the narrative from the start. This twist shocked the town of Blue Hollow. A man they once saw as a respected businessman had not only betrayed his family, but also the community. The media latched onto the story, and Paul's double life became front-page news. Isabelle, now under the spotlight, remained focused on making sure her mother and Rebecca received the justice they deserved. In a final twist, forensic experts uncovered another piece of evidence. Blood traces from both Lillian and Rebecca were found in the trunk of Paul's car, further proving his involvement. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. The town of Blue Hollow had been deceived, and now the full truth was out. Paul's sentencing came swiftly. He was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. Isabelle stood in the courtroom, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. The man who had caused her so much pain would never hurt anyone again, but nothing could bring her mother back. The story had come to a close, but Isabelle's journey was far from over. She would carry the weight of these events for the rest of her life. As Isabelle walked out of the courtroom, the weight of everything that had happened settled on her shoulders. Her mother, Lillian, was gone. Rebecca, too. The secrets, the lies, and the betrayals had all come to light, but at a cost Isabelle could never have imagined. The house in Blue Hollow, once filled with memories, now stood as a reminder of the darkness that had consumed her family. Though Paul Monroe was locked away for life, the scars he left behind would never fully heal. Isabelle knew that. She had uncovered the truth, but the truth had taken so much from her. In the quiet moments, Isabelle found herself reflecting on the love her mother had hidden and the lengths people will go to protect their secrets. Sometimes the real danger doesn't come from what's hidden, but from those willing to do anything to keep it that way. And that's the story of the Silent House, a family torn apart by secrets and a search for the truth that came at a great cost. What do you think about Isabelle's discovery? Could Paul have kept the truth hidden forever if she hadn't acted? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this case. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, share it with others, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next true crime story. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay safe.